Ethan hadn't planned to come back. He had told himself many times that he was done, that some stories didn't deserve a second ending. But when he drove through that small town again and saw the familiar white fence and the garden blooming beyond it, his heart betrayed him. The sight of those roses, perfectly trimmed and alive, pulled him back like gravity. And there she was, Claire, on her knees in the dirt, wearing the same faded blue jeans and that old sun hat she used to wear when they were together. The world around him seemed to pause. For the first time in months, he forgot the noise inside his head. He stood there for a long moment, hands in his pockets, not knowing what to say or even if he had the right to be there. The afternoon sun painted everything gold. The petals, the dust in the air. It was the same light that used to fill their porch when they laughed over coffee in the mornings. That memory hurt, but it also felt strangely alive, like something waiting to be finished. Claire didn't notice him at first. She was focused on her plants, humming softly as she worked, her hands covered in soil. Ethan could almost hear the rhythm of their old life in that sound. He remembered how she used to spend hours in that garden, saying it helped her think, helped her forget the world. He used to tease her about talking to flowers. But now he saw the peace in it, the quiet she always needed that he never gave her. He took a slow breath. Part of him wanted to turn around and leave before she saw him. But another part, stronger, whispered that this might be his last chance. He stepped forward, his shoes crunching lightly on the gravel path. Claire's head lifted slightly, but she didn't turn. He hesitated, heart pounding. "Claire," he said quietly. Her hands stopped moving. She froze for a second, then slowly looked over her shoulder. Their eyes met, two people standing in the same place but from different times. She didn't say a word. For a heartbeat, the world was only silence, except for the soft rustle of leaves and a bird calling somewhere far away. Ethan swallowed hard. "Hi," he said, trying to sound casual, but his voice cracked slightly. Claire stood up, brushing the dirt from her knees. "Ethan," she said at last. His name sounded fragile on her lips, like something she hadn't spoken in a long time. He gave a faint, nervous smile. "You're still growing those roses." She nodded. "They don't ask for much," she said softly. "Just a little care." Her tone was calm, but he could hear the distance in it. The careful edge people use when they don't want to reopen old wounds. Ethan nodded slowly. "I'm sorry for coming without calling. I was driving by and I saw the house." Claire's eyes lowered to the flowers. "It's been a while." "A year," he said quietly, "almost to the day." That caught her off guard. She looked at him again, the sunlight glinting off her hair. "You remember?" He smiled faintly. "I remember everything." She looked away. "Some things are better left behind, Ethan." He wanted to agree. He wanted to say that he understood. But instead, he found himself stepping closer. "Maybe, but some things keep following you no matter how far you go." She sighed, crossing her arms. "You always did talk like that. Like everything was a poem." He chuckled softly. "And you always pretended not to like it." For a brief second, her lips curved into a small smile. Then it disappeared. "Why are you here, really?" The question hit him straight in the chest. He thought about lying, saying he just wanted to check on her or see the garden. But the truth was simpler and heavier. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you," he said. "About the way we ended things. About how it all fell apart when it didn't have to." Claire's expression softened for a moment, then hardened again. "It wasn't that simple, Ethan." T nodded. "I know, but I made it harder. I thought walking away was the right thing. I thought you'd be better off." "Maybe I was," she said quietly. "Or maybe I just learned how to be without you." That hurt more than he expected. He looked at her, at the streak of dirt on her cheek, the faint tiredness in her eyes. She looked stronger, somehow more grounded, more real. The woman who once waited for him to come home now looked like she didn't need anyone. And yet, something in her gaze told him she still remembered. He took another step closer, his voice lower now. "You look happy," he said, though it came out more like a question. "I'm peaceful," she replied after a pause. "That's different." Ethan smiled faintly. You always said peace was better than happiness. I never understood that. She gave him a long look. And now I do, he said softly, because I haven't felt peaceful since I left. The breeze moved between them, carrying the scent of roses and wet soil. Claire glanced at the flowers again, her hands twitching as if she wanted to keep working just to avoid looking at him. But she stayed still. You shouldn't have come, she said, though her tone lacked conviction. I know, he admitted, but if I didn't, I'd never forgive myself. Her eyes met his again, tired, unsure, but not angry. Ethan, things changed. I changed. He nodded. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we both did. There was a long pause. The garden around them felt alive, the sound of bees, the smell of fresh grass, the colors bursting quietly everywhere. It was the same garden they once planted together, the one where he had promised her they'd grow old watching seasons change. He remembered how she'd laughed then, calling him too dramatic. Now, standing there again, the irony felt almost poetic. Claire finally broke the silence. You can't just show up after a year and expect everything to make sense. Not asking for that, he said. I just needed to see you to tell you that I still care, even if it doesn't change anything. Her face softened slightly. She looked at him for a long moment, then whispered, You still talk like you believe in miracles. He smiled sadly. Only one, Claire. She shook her head, but there was a flicker of warmth in her eyes, tiny, fragile, but real. Then she turned back to her roses, kneeling again, trying to hide the small tremor in her hands. Ethan stood there, silent, watching her. The distance between them was just a few steps, but it felt like an ocean. For a while, neither spoke. The sunlight began to fade, and the shadows grew longer. Ethan knew he should leave, but his feet refused to move. He wanted to say more, to ask for another chance, but the words caught in his throat. Finally, Claire spoke without looking up. If you're going to stand there, at least hand me the watering can. Ethan blinked, surprised. Then, slowly, he smiled and picked it up. He passed it to her, and for a brief second their hands touched, warm, trembling. And alive with something neither of them could name. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was something close, like the first breath of spring after a long winter. And in that quiet garden, surrounded by the scent of roses and the soft hum of life, Ethan realized this wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something fragile, something worth saving. Claire stood in her garden with the watering can still in her hands, heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. Seeing Ethan again had shaken something deep inside her. A year ago, she had promised herself that if he ever came back, she would be calm, strong, and distant. Yet now all that calmness was gone. The sight of him, his familiar voice, the way he looked at her as if she was still his world, brought back every memory she had buried under the soil with her flowers. Ethan stayed silent, watching her. The air between them was heavy with things that wanted to be said but couldn't find a way out. Finally, Claire set down the watering can and straightened up. Ethan, she said quietly, you shouldn't be here. I know, he replied, his voice low but steady. But I had to see you. I had to make things right. She gave a faint laugh, though there was no humor in it. Make things right. After a year of silence? He nodded slowly, guilt clouding his face. I didn't know what else to do. I thought giving you space was what you needed. Claire crossed her arms, looking at the ground. Space and silence aren't the same thing, Ethan. You didn't just step away, you disappeared. Ethan winced. I know. And every day since then, I've regretted it. She turned to him sharply. Then why didn't you say something sooner? You knew where I lived. My number never changed. Its voice cracked slightly. Because I was afraid. Claire frowned, confused. Afraid of what? He took a deep breath. Afraid that you'd moved on. That you'd built a life without me. That if I called, you'd tell me what I already knew, that I'd lost you. For a moment, she said nothing. The hurt in his words was real, but so was her anger. You don't get to decide for me, Ethan. You left, not me. You walked away when all I wanted was for you to stay and talk to me. He nodded, looking down. You're right. I thought I was doing the mature thing. We were fighting all the time, and I thought giving you peace meant leaving. Claire shook her head. Peace doesn't come from running away. You can't fix silence with more silence. He stepped closer, just a little. I know that now. That's why I'm here. She looked at him, her expression softening despite herself. You always had good intentions, Ethan, but you never learned how to stay when things got hard. He gave a sad smile. And you always wanted things to be perfect before they could be fixed. That made her pause. There was truth in his words, and she hated that he was right. She had loved him deeply, but expected too much, wanted him to understand her without words, to fight harder without asking. The both of them had built walls instead of bridges, and by the time they realized it, it was too late. The sound of wind moving through the trees filled the quiet. For a while, neither of them spoke. It wasn't the silence of anger anymore, but of two people standing in the ruins of something they once built together. Claire sighed, brushing her hands against her jeans. It's strange, she said softly. After all this time, I thought I'd have more to say to you. More anger, maybe? But now that you're here, I just feel tired. Ethan nodded. I've felt tired too. Of pretending that I moved on. Of acting like I didn't miss the way you'd hum while cooking or talk to your flowers like they were old friends. That made her smile faintly, despite herself. You remember that? I remember everything, he said. Even the little things, especially though sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. For a second, she saw the same man she had fallen in love with years ago. The one who used to drive out to her garden just to bring her coffee. The one who stayed up with her under the stars, talking about dreams they never chased. She looked at him now, older, softer, maybe wiser. Something in her heart ached. Ethan, she began slowly, we can't just go back to how things were. He nodded immediately. I don't want to go back. I want to start again. It's from here. From this garden, if that's what it takes. His words hung in the air like a promise. Claire turned away, pretending to focus on a rosebush, but her hands trembled slightly. You make it sound so easy. It's not, he said. But maybe it's worth trying. She didn't answer. Her heart was torn between what she felt and what she feared. Love was beautiful, yes, but it had also hurt her once deeply. And though part of her wanted to believe him, another part whispered that believing would only lead to heartbreak again. Ethan watched her in silence. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the push and pull between reason and memory. You don't have to decide now, he said gently. I just needed you to know I'm sorry for everything. She looked at him again. You think sorry is enough? No, he said, but it's a start. She sighed, her eyes softening. You've always had a way with words, Ethan, smiled faintly. Words are all I have left. For a moment they just looked at each other, the past and present meeting in a single quiet breath. The garden felt different now, live in a new way. The colors seemed brighter, the air thicker with meaning. Even the silence felt fuller, no longer empty, but waiting. Claire took a step back and leaned against the wooden fence. Do you ever think about what went wrong? She asked quietly. Every day, he replied. I replay it in my head, what I said, what I didn't say. I thought love was enough, but I learned it's not just love that keeps two people together. It's effort. It's listening. She looked down, blinking away a tear. We were both learning. Maybe too late. He hesitated, then said softly, maybe not too late. The words lingered, and she didn't push them away this time. She looked around at the garden, the roses, the soft soil, the patch of sunlight falling over the old wooden bench. So many memories lived here. Some painful, some beautiful. Finally, she exhaled slowly. You should go for now, she said. This is a lot to take in. Ethan nodded. I understand. He hesitated, then added, but can I come back tomorrow? Just to help with the garden. She gave a small, hesitant smile. You still remember how to prune roses? I might need a reminder, he said. She shook her head, amused despite everything. We'll see. Ethan smiled softly. Hopefully, Anne stepped back toward the gate. For the first time in a long time, the goodbye between them didn't feel final. It felt like a pause as he walked away. Claire stood there watching him. The wind moved gently through the roses, brushing against her hand. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a year, she didn't feel alone in her garden, somewhere deep inside. Something small and fragile began to stir, like the first bud pushing through after a long winter. Maybe love didn't end. Maybe it just waited for courage to return. The rain began quietly at first, the soft drizzle that tapped on the leaves and petals in Claire's garden. Ethan had stayed until the sun dipped low, helping her cover delicate plants and making sure the garden was safe from the coming storm. Neither of them spoke much. Words felt unnecessary. The silence was heavy with understanding, the kind that only two people who had shared love and loss could feel. Claire moved with grace among her flowers, shaking water from their leaves, while Ethan stood nearby, hands deep in the pockets of his jacket, watching her carefully. He noticed the small movements, the way her fingers lingered on the rose petals, the subtle tilt of her head as she listened to the rain, the faint line of concentration on her brow. He had imagined this reunion countless times in his mind, but reality felt different, more delicate, more fragile. He wanted to say so many things, but none of them seemed right. Instead, he simply offered the umbrella when the wind picked up, holding it over her small frame. She glanced at him, hesitated, then accepted it. Their hands brushed briefly as she adjusted the strap, and the small contact sent an unexpected jolt through both of them. Neither spoke. The rain carried their unspoken emotions, washing the air of tension and leaving a raw, quiet intimacy in its place. Ethan watched her for a long time, remembering the times they had laughed in this very garden, how she would tease him for talking too much, how he would sit and listen to her hum while working. A year had passed, but the memories felt immediate, pressing against his chest. Claire turned slightly to him, the corner of her lips lifting in a faint, hesitant smile. It was a smile he had dreamed of but feared he would never see again. The storm intensified, and they both ran under the porch roof for shelter, dripping wet, laughter mixing with the sound of rain. "You always make everything dramatic," Claire said, shaking water from her hair. "I prefer dramatic to silent," he replied with a small grin. "Silent doesn't suit either of us." She laughed softly, though it didn't reach her eyes fully. There was a tension that neither could ignore, the weight of what had happened between them. But there was also a tenderness, something that had never left, lurking beneath the surface. Ethan could see it in the way she kept glancing at him, the way her fingers flexed nervously. When the rain finally eased, Ethan stayed close, offering her his jacket. "Here," he said gently. "You'll catch a cold." Claire hesitated, then slipped into the jacket. The oversized fabric enveloped her, and he couldn't help but notice how small she looked and how fragile it made him feel. It wasn't weakness. It was just reality. The reality of someone he had loved and lost and now had a chance to protect again. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft, almost lost in the patter of the remaining rain. They stood there together, shoulders almost touching, both aware of the unspoken words hovering between them. Claire finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "I thought I was over you," she admitted. "I thought I could forget, but seeing you again, it's like nothing ever changed." Ethan's chest tightened. He stepped closer. "I never stopped thinking about you, Claire. Not for a single day." Her eyes welled up with tears, and she looked away, ashamed to show them at first. "And I thought I was strong enough to let go." "You are strong," he said softly. "You survived without me. But surviving isn't the same as living, and I see now that I can't live without trying to fix this." Claire exhaled slowly, the sound mingling with the fresh scent of wet earth and flowers. "You always had a way of saying the right thing, even when it hurt the most," she murmured. Her words weren't meant as a compliment, yet they felt like one. Ethan took her hands gently in his own, feeling the warmth through the damp fabric. "I don't have grand gestures left," he said, "but I have the chance to be here, to make small things right." Her gaze met his, searching, hesitant. afraid. What if we try again, Ethan, and it fails? What if I get hurt like before? Then I'll face it, he said without hesitation. I'll face it with you. I don't care about the past anymore. I care about now, about what we can grow together. The sincerity in his voice, the unflinching hope in his eyes, broke through the last walls she had built. She felt the weight of the year's silence. The loneliness, the longing began to dissolve. It didn't vanish completely. But there was room now for something else. Possibility, hope, and the quiet stirring of love that had never truly left. For the first time since he arrived, Claire laughed delight, genuine sound that mingled with the fading rain. Ethan smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time. The garden around them seemed alive in a new way, as though the flowers themselves recognized that something was changing. Even the roses, battered by the rain, stood a little taller, their colors deeper, reflecting the fragility and beauty of what was unfolding between them. I can't promise everything will be perfect, Claire said after a pause, her voice small but steady. But maybe we can start over. That's all I need, Ethan said softly. Just a chance to be here, to be with you, without rushing or expecting. We can take it one step at a time. She nodded, her eyes glistening in the soft light. I think I'd like that. One step at a time. They remained under the porch, watching as the rain formed small puddles in the garden and the clouds slowly parted. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was full of understanding, trust, and a tentative hope. Claire rested her head slightly on his shoulder, and Ethan felt a calm settle over him that he hadn't known in months. Ethan realized that love wasn't about grand declarations or dramatic gestures. It was about showing up. It was about quiet moments in the rain, offering a jacket, sharing a laugh, and standing together when the storm passes. And in that garden, with the scent of wet roses and the soft hum of the world around them, he understood that even after heartbreak, hearts could find their way back to each other. Claire looked up at him, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. You never stopped believing in us, did you? No, he said firmly. Not for a second. And I won't stop now. The last drops of rain fell, and the sun peeked through the clouds, casting golden light across the garden. Ethan and Claire stood there, shoulder to shoulder, letting the world heal around them. There were no promises, no guarantees. Just two people who had lost and found each other again, willing to try, willing to feel, willing to grow together. Ethan squeezed her hand lightly, and Claire held on. The garden, once a place of solitude and reflection, became the place of their new beginning. And for the first time in a long time, both of them allowed themselves to believe that love could bloom again after a long winter. Weeks passed, and the small garden began to feel alive in a new way, not just because of the flowers, but because of the quiet presence that Ethan brought every day. He didn't overwhelm Claire with grand gestures or dramatic words. Instead, he showed up. Sometimes he helped her water the plants. Other times he simply sat on the old wooden bench, watching her work, listening to the soft hum of her voice. The garden had always been her sanctuary, a place where she could think, dream, and care for something living. Now it became a space for them to rebuild, gently, carefully, piece by piece. Claire noticed the change in herself first. She laughed more icily when he was around, even at small things, a shared joke about a stubborn weed, the way a robin landed on the fence, or the sun catching on his damp hair after a light rain. The tension that had hovered between them for months slowly dissolved into familiarity. Every day she realized how much she had missed the quiet comfort of his presence. The way he had once known her without her needing to explain anything. She still had walls, still had fears, but they no longer felt insurmountable. One morning, the first warm light of spring touched the garden. The roses were blooming again, some already showing the tender pink of new buds, others a full crimson glow. Claire knelt on the soil, humming softly as she pruned the older stems. The memory of their first awkward reunion in the garden came back to her, and she felt a warmth in her chest that she hadn't allowed herself in a long time. Ethan approached her quietly from behind, holding a small bag of fertilizer and garden tools. He stopped a few feet away, watching her for a moment, drinking in the sight of her concentration. She didn't notice him at first. Her focus was absolute, as it always had been when she was with her plants. He smiled faintly, remembering how she always seemed to become part of the earth when she knelt there, like she was growing and nurturing not just the garden, but herself. "I see you didn't waste any time," he said softly, his voice breaking the peaceful silence. Claire looked up, startled, and then smiled a smile that reached her eyes this time. "You're here again," she said, a hint of surprise mixed with warmth in her voice. "I told you I'd be," he replied, stepping closer. "I'm right here." Just like before, there was a quiet pause, the kind that felt heavy but comfortable at the same time. Ethan knelt down beside her, helping her gently lift a rose branch that was bending under the weight of dew. Their hands brushed, and neither pulled away this time. Instead, they lingered, sharing a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had endured. Fragile, but unbroken. "You've really taken care of this place," Ethan said, glancing around. "It's beautiful." Claire shook her head softly. "It's always been beautiful. I just needed it to remind me of hope." He looked at her, realizing that she had been tending more than Rosé. She had been tending to her heart, too. "And did it work?" he asked gently. She hesitated for a moment, her fingers stilling on the plant. Then she nodded. "I think so." Slowly, yes. "There's hope again." Ethan smiled, a quiet, relieved smile. "Good, because there's something I need to say, even if it's just small. I've waited for this for you, for a chance to be here without rushing or demanding. I don't need anything else right now." Claire looked at him, her eyes glistening with emotion she tried to hide but could not. "You've changed," she whispered. "You're patient now? Different, I've learned," he admitted. "I learned that love isn't about words or promises. It's about showing up, about being present, and about caring every single day, even in small ways." The sunlight caught on the raindrops still clinging to the petals, and it was as if the entire garden was witnessing this quiet reconciliation. Claire felt a flutter in her chest, a mixture of relief and longing she hadn't felt in months. For the first time, she didn't fear the future. She only allowed herself to imagine it, gently, carefully, with Ethan by her side. "Do you remember the first time we planted these roses?" she asked, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "I do," he said, smiling. "You were impatient, I was clumsy, and somehow we ended up laughing the entire afternoon." She laughed quietly at the memory, a sound that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. "And now look at them. They survived everything just like us." Ethan reached out and took her hand gently. "We did survive. And now, maybe we can finally grow together without the fear that pulled us apart before." She didn't pull her hand away. Instead, she let it rest in his, the warmth of his fingers grounding her. "I'd like that," she said quietly. One step at a time. The rest of the morning passed in gentle companionship. They worked side by side in the garden, sharing small smiles, soft words, and the kind of quiet intimacy that didn't need grand gestures to feel meaningful. Every weed pulled, every branch trimmed, every drop of water poured together, strengthened. A bond that had been fractured, but never broken. Ethan realized that love didn't need fireworks or dramatic confessions. It thrived in small moments, the careful pruning of a rose, a shared laugh at a stubborn weed, the quiet company of someone who understood your silences. And Claire felt the same, that love wasn't about perfection, but about presence, about standing together in the garden, in life, in all the moments in between. As the sun climbed higher, they paused on the wooden bench, watching the garden sway gently in the breeze. The air smelled of earth, flowers, and new beginnings. Ethan turned to Claire and said softly, "I don't want to rush anything. I just want to be here with you every day I can. That's enough for me." Claire leaned slightly on his shoulder, feeling the warmth and comfort she had missed for so long. "It is enough," she whispered. For a long moment, they sat there, watching the roses bloom and the sunlight dance across the petals. It wasn't dramatic. There were no grand declarations, no promises of forever, No rush to fix the past. Just two hearts, slowly learning to trust, to care, and to love again. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. I think this is how it's supposed to feel, he said. Claire smiled, her eyes reflecting the sunlight. Yes, this is how it should feel. Quiet, simple, true. And in that garden, surrounded by the scent of roses and the soft hum of life, they realized that love had returned, not loud, not hurried, but steady, patient, and real. The bloom after winter was fragile but strong, beautiful in its own quiet way. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. Thank you for letting me stay. She looked at him, her heart full. Thank you for coming back. And for the first time in a long while, both of them believed that some things, no matter how broken, could bloom again when nurtured with patience, care, and love.